This is the download recap from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. The download recap is brought to you by Podscribe. You can find out more at podscribe.com. Now, let's get into the week's top stories. First up, podcasting has earned its seat. Who's ready to be at the table? A new piece by Bryan Barletta. During Advertising Week Europe, the business of podcasting space hosted 16 panels over 2 days, attracting nearly 450 unique attendees. An important detail that Barletta noticed, however, was the recurring trend of attendees showing up because the space was discussing podcasting. A quote from the article, quote, "For years, podcasting operated in a kind of productive silo. We built great things, argued about attribution, celebrated our wins, and largely talked to ourselves. It was a lot of fun, but the industry's biggest conversations happened at podcast-specific events, in podcast-specific publications, among people who were already convinced. That was fine, maybe even necessary for a medium still proving itself. But podcasting has proven itself. According to our Podcast Landscape 2025 data, 55% of Americans consumed a podcast in the past month. That's not niche, that's mainstream media. That's a bigger call for rooms to conquer." End quote. With this mainstream attribution comes interest from the brand strategists, media buyers, and agency leads who found their way into the business of podcasting space in London. Barletta says the goal of Sounds Profitable remains consistent. Put podcasting in the room where decisions get made and conversations larger than podcasting happen. It's time for podcasting to bring presence to the larger advertising space, commensurate with the mainstream medium. Beyond the broadcast, why podcasts are the new home for sports fans. Sports Social Podcast Network Director of Sport, Jim Salveson, highlights podcasting's power to connect with audiences, build trust, and provide flexibility unavailable in traditional broadcast media. Here's a quote from the article, quote, "This isn't about replacing live sport, it's about extending it, emotionally, editorially, and commercially. Sport audiences now demand content that reaches beyond the final whistle and creates an opportunity for broadcasters both editorially and commercially." End quote. Podcasts are an opt-in medium, with consumers seeking out specific shows and hosts. According to Edison Research's Sports Audio Report, 51% of general sports fans will continue following an athlete even after they're traded to a new team. By contrast, 76% of sports podcast listeners continue to follow a traded athlete. Salveson pitches some opportunities for broadcasters launching official podcasts, such as follow teams or players across tournaments, target younger mobile-first audiences, or create native language content for international listeners. YouTube's new TV features are the antithesis of Netflix's second screen problem. One of YouTube's newly announced features is named Stations, acting as the platform's answer to the 24/7 programming channels found on free ad-supported TV or FAST platforms like Tubi, Pluto TV, and Roku. Stations will debut with coverage of this year's Coachella Festival. YouTube's video-focused chatbot Ask, currently available on desktop and mobile, is coming to smart TVs with voice control. Here's a quote from the James Hale article. Quote, "In an example screenshot posted by Kurt Wilms, YouTube's Senior Director of Product Management, a viewer asks the chatbot how Nick DiGiovanni got started as YouTube. The bot, which runs on Google's Gemini LLM, responds with facts about DiGiovanni's background as a MasterChef finalist and mentions how his first videos were filmed in his apartment." End quote. In addition to Ask, YouTube has announced a new system dubbed TV Companion. It will use a user's phone to detect what is playing on their TV, allowing them to interact with comments, control playback, and, quote, dive deeper into content without missing a beat, end quote. Independent Australian show tops US Apple podcast charts in 47 days. Independent Queensland-based podcast network Mashed Pumpkin Productions launched What I Survived on February 18th, 2026. In the podcast's first 47 days, it hit number 31 in the US Apple Podcast overall chart, number 1 in documentary, and number 4 in society and culture. Host and network founder Jack Lawrence credits Apple Podcast US homepage editorial feature with the chart climbing success and over 440,000 downloads. Here's a quote from Lawrence, quote, "It's honestly wild to see my show sitting among some serious heavy hitters in the world of U.S. podcasting. It's a market I've been trying to crack for the last 4 years. The fact that what I survived as the show to do it is honestly very unexpected." End quote. The show's performance is a reminder of the impact of editorial features and how much power they still have in podcasting. Lawrence notes his show's peak had it charting alongside productions from iHeart Podcast, Wondery, NPR, Barstool Sports, and the New York Times. OpenAI just acquired Silicon Valley podcast TBPN. TubeFilter covers the recent acquisition of tech podcast TBPN. The Financial Times reported the deal is valued in the, quote, low hundreds of millions of dollars, end quote. One interesting fact is the deal includes an editorial independence covenant, which limits OpenAI's editorial influence over the show's news coverage. OpenAI has made the show ad-free. Marketecture Media founder Ari Paparo published the hot take, quote, "I'm sorry, but this deal makes no sense financially, editorially, or strategically," end quote. Over on X, Anthony Pompliano proposes the framing that OpenAI's investment isn't necessarily in TBPN as a business or a show, it's an investment in the TBPN team. By letting the hosts operate without the stress of ad sales, OpenAI is investing in a media tool to destigmatize generative AI for broader audiences. Here's a quote from Pompliano's post, quote, "The money was merely the price it would take for the team to give up their neutral position in the ecosystem and point their talent behind a single company. OpenAI wanted the people, TBPN was just the vessel to effectuate that transaction. And the money was the market clearing price to pull a blockbuster trade for the first round draft pick talent," end quote. Now it's time for Quick Hits. These are articles I've covered from throughout the week that are worth including in your weekend reading. They just didn't make it into top story coverage. So first up, nominations are now open for the Quill Podcast Awards, marking its 5th year running. The deadline to submit nominations for the first round of voting is April 20th. Podscribe has announced its radio air checks capability now includes SiriusXM inventory, including allowing advertisers and agencies to track SiriusXM radio ads from Podscribe's workflow. In addition, Podscribe has also rolled out an automated pixel email scheduling tool and the ability for publishers to invite podcasters to have secure and scoped access to performance data. American Public Media and Stream Guys have partnered to launch Inform Media Network, a digital audio ad network with over 30 public media and prestige audio publishers. And finally, Pod News reports the TuneIn broadcaster portal, which closed on February of 2024, has reopened. TuneIn's podcast directory remains the default path for getting podcasts into Tesla cars, Sonos speakers, and several other platforms. That was the download recap brought to you by Podscribe and Sounds Profitable. I know I went through today's stories fast, so remember you can click the one link in your show notes to take you to today's episode post on soundsprofitable.com, where you can find every link to everything I just talked about. For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Molly Demillier, Bryan Barletta, and Tom Webster. And as always, special thanks to you for listening as I brought you the top stories from this week in the business of podcasting. Robot.
Download complete.